Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Chrissy Hodges, advocate for OCD, in particular the community name Pure OCD, which is Intrusive Thoughts with Mental Rituals. It's also the name of my memoir, Pure OCD, The Invisible Side of Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. Today I want to talk about insight, what that means when it comes to living with OCD, what it means to have low insight, and also maybe some tips and tools on what to do if you are experiencing low insight with OCD. I am a certified peer support specialist. I work with people all over the world, providing support, one-on-one support for peer support, as well as groups. And I also have an online community. In the community, you pay per month, and in that, you get weekly support groups, one-on-one peer support. And I also run community classes and events during the month. You can go to ChrissyHodgesCommunity.com to join that, and ChrissyHodges.com to find out more about what I can do through my practice. An OCD is an app, and inside that app, you can meet other people, post on forums, find resources, and they also provide telehealth, ERP, therapy as well. If you want to find out if they do telehealth in your area, go to treatmyocd.com or nocd.com. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what I mean when I say insight when it comes to OCD. If you're doing all the normal research for OCD, you're probably going to see this a lot. People that live with OCD have insight that what they're experiencing, what they're thinking about, the images, the feelings they have aren't real, meaning like they aren't aligned with what you believe, what you want, your values, your desires, but yet you can't stop it, which then, of course, creates the problem of, well, if I can't stop it, does that mean that it's real? When we hear that definition, that's also the way that we describe OCD being egoistonic. You'll hear that often. And that basically is the same thing. It's experiencing having things, thoughts, images, feelings, things like that, that aren't aligned with your values, morals, and desires. However, you are continuing to have these kind of against that will, right? So this can make you feel like there's two parts of you. There's two selves. There's a second self. And that's often how people describe that. So when you hear this definition, you will hear, I am experiencing intrusive thoughts, images, feelings, all of those things. I don't want them. I know they're not real, but I can't stop them. And that's probably where you're going to get triggered, right? Because then you're going to go, but I don't know if this isn't real. And this feels really real. And now I'm confused about whether I have insight or not. This happens a lot when it comes to intrusive thoughts about psychosis or experiencing schizophrenia, anything around delusions and hallucinations, because essentially, the difference between egodystonic and non-egodystonic is that you're not identifying that as something that you have insight with. And so often people will say, I don't think I have insight anymore, so I must be experiencing psychosis. I often say, if you are worried that you're not experiencing insight, if you're worried you don't have insight, that means you have insight. You have insight about not having insight, so you have insight. Anyway, but that is an example of all of the little tricks that OCD can play on even just knowing the psychoeducation around what insight means. All of a sudden, you're going to sit here and go, everything about this definition of egodystonic has nothing to do with me because now I want the thoughts. Now it is not against my desires. It's not against my values. All of that can get mixed up in your head. Often people who are experiencing, especially taboo intrusive thoughts, and even not with taboo intrusive thoughts and other intrusive thoughts, you may think to yourself, I don't even know what my values are anymore. I feel like I've lost my values. And this really does coincide very much with that. I feel like there's two selves inside of me. There's two people. There's the one I keep hidden, which of course, then you're terrified that that's this sinister, deviant, horrible part of you that is just trying to push its way out. And we're using OCD as an excuse, and then there's the other person that we're showing to the world that doesn't know that we're just dying and suffering inside, right? So lots of moving parts here when it comes to that. But let's talk about insight. You have insight. You have insight because you're here at this video. While insight can also be really fucked with OCD, the fact that you are even looking to find out that this is OCD is a good idea, that this is that you have insight into what this is. Now, you may feel like that has shifted, because remember, when we're relying on our feelings to prove or disprove that OCD is real or not, we're always going to lose. I have plenty of videos on this because our feelings cannot be relied on when it comes to OCD because OCD will use your feelings against you. So when we're starting to talk about insight and you say, I don't want these, now you're all of a sudden looking for feelings that are going to contradict the actual intrusive thoughts. Um, Meaning, if I'm having intrusive thoughts about incest or something, I'm going to look for feelings of disgust. If I have feelings of disgust and repulsion, okay, good. That means I don't want this. It is egodystonic. It is not aligning with my values. I do have insight that I don't want it because you're relying on your feelings to prop up that insight. Ooh, we're in trouble because you can't rely on feelings when it comes to OCD. So all of a sudden, now, if you're testing and checking yourself and you're going, I want to feel disgust when it comes to these intrusive thoughts, and the disgust isn't there, or you can't get that feeling, or, oh, Lord forbid, you get a feeling of arousal, or you get a feeling of excitement or butterflies. Uh-oh, now you will start to think, oh my God, this internal second self of mine is starting to practice acceptance. I'm starting to accept that these might be right. Then you might move on to, I've lost my values. And now, when the physical sensations get really real, this is when you experience low insight. Okay, so this is the main point that I want to talk about in this video is low insight. The reason why I want to talk about this is that I did a Q&A with Johnny Say in my community the other day. If you want to join the community, you can hear any of the events, any of the therapists and stuff I've had previously. I record them all, so you can go in there and listen to all the archives. So feel free to join at any time, chrissyhodgescommunity.com. Anyway, we had a discussion with Johnny Say last week, and the topic of insight came up. And I have always been curious about this. And so I asked him during the Q&A, what do people do? What does it mean to have low insight? And what do people do when they have it? So what we will hear a lot, because this is what's so bad about research about OCD, because hear so much shit on the internet. That often it's just scary and it's going to make your OCD go bonkers. And so one of those things that you might hear is that people with low insight are hard to treat. That if you have low insight with OCD, that you're likely not going to have successful therapy. So I'm here to bust that myth. I'm here to at least give you some hope with that myth if that's what you've been told or if that's what you're experiencing. What do we mean when we say low insight? Okay. If you have insight that this is OCD, okay, even if you are just submerged with thoughts and misery, you can still recognize the thoughts as, I know this is part of OCD, but it feels so real and I'm so scared and I'm doing, multitudes of compulsions all the time. But you can still say like, oh my God, this OCD is killing me, whatever. When you start to have low insight, I'm going to use me as an example. I've had two themes in my life where I was so entrenched in the theme that my insight was so low. The first was sexual orientation OCD. So I would have physical sensations, meaning the groinal. So it is like arousal non-concordance. So I was experiencing feelings of arousal, excitement, and I was like, why am I feeling these feelings to these thoughts that I don't want, that I'm scared of? But when I would get so deep into those feelings of the physical and especially the emotional stuff, the sadness, the shame, the guilt, that I was, hiding myself from the world and I was hiding the secret, just the grief of like, if this is real, then, I'm living this double life and this isn't who I am. And do I have to be this? And so all of the emotions plus the physical sensations, I was just swept up in the experience to the point where at some points, I just didn't even know who I was anymore. It's that moment where you stare in the mirror and you just look at yourself and go, I don't even know who you are. That's low insight. At least it was for me. I can't say that that's what it was for you, but for me, it was not being able at all to determine that what was going on with me was a disordered thinking, was disordered feelings, all of that. I was so terrified that it was aligned with who I was, that I had lost the insight that I could separate the two as Chrissy and disorder. Now, granted, when I had sexual orientation OCD, I had no idea this was OCD. So I didn't even know what I was separating it from. So I was just dealing with what's going on in, one part of my brain versus the other part. But the second part I think will be really helpful. I experienced OCD. I've talked about it in a few videos, not much detail, of physical pain. I had physical pain in my feet starting in like 2019, 2020, and for years. I experienced this. Years. And that my insight was so low. It's like someone could sit there and tell me, you're doing all these compulsions. This is OCD. And I would go, okay, yeah, it's OCD, but it feels too real to be OCD. And I was so bought in to that. This is how it's going to be for the rest of my life. I'm trapped. Even if it is OCD, it doesn't matter because the pain is still there. You know, knowing it's OCD isn't taking away the pain. And so that made my insight so low that I was not willing to do treatment. That's the difference. And that's what I came here to say. Now, you may think to yourself, but you're in recovery. Okay, I am in recovery. That doesn't mean I don't still experience OCD. And it also doesn't mean that I don't experience every part of OCD, meaning low insight, meaning an unwillingness to do treatment because I had such low insight. I was too scared that I would find something out if I applied treatment, if I did exposure response prevention, that I would find out this wasn't OCD and this was the fate for the rest of my life. So I just kept waking up hoping it would go away, waking up hoping that maybe the insight would be higher. I didn't even know I had low insight, which made it even worse. So it's like a double whammy. So low insight is when you are so bought in to the experience that you cannot see that it's OCD, and or you're bought in to the narrative that because it's not OCD, there is no means of getting better. And the fears are, for me, were mainly around I am trapped in this forever. And the sadness that went along with that, the despair, I can't even explain to you how devastating it would feel at times. Now, I had to approach this in a different way moving forward. Once I really realized, dude, this is fucking my life up all the time. After a few years, I was still able to function. I mean, it wasn't like in the forefront drowning me every day, but it was there. And there was a lot of doom and sadness, and at times just very severe depression. The way that I dealt with this was, first of all, I had a great physical therapist who understood OCD and understood exposure. And she just got on my ass. Like sometimes you just have to have somebody that is just like, snap the fuck out of it. I mean, she was basically like, there is nothing wrong with your foot. She was like, you have pain and you might have pain because you've got arthritis or you've got this or that. She was like, but there's nothing keeping you from doing life. She was like, so either do life or be miserable the rest of your life. And she just really, help me with some physical exposures that I'm not even sure like a therapist would be able to think of. She would get in there with me and be like, okay, here's the pain and here's what we're going to do. And I would do exposures on these physical things to show my body I didn't have to be afraid of it. The same thing as exposure response prevention. I was showing my body there's nothing to be afraid of. I can still do this and be okay. And after a while of doing those, I had a willingness to do it. And then I just had you know what? I don't even care. I'm tired of not living life. Regardless of if I have pain the rest of my life, every day when I step out of my bed and I think about my feet and my feet hurt every day, I don't care. I'm ready to live. And I slowly made gains. And I did start to see the insight really come back in order to give me motivation to do more treatment for it. Now, I cannot say that all of my stuff is going to be helpful for you, but I really hope that it is because I understand and I understand the lows of having low insight. One of the things that really helped me, again, not to just keep promoting, but I'm going to because it was such a huge part of my healing, was meeting other people. That helped with the insight too. Meeting other people and hearing their stories. You don't hear a lot about people having OCD about physical stuff. So when I would talk to clients and then I would meet people in groups and they would say, "Oh, I experienced that too." All of a sudden, that was just like, that was a little tap on my insight of like, Christy, this is OCD. This can be OCD, and you're not alone in this. And so hearing other people's stories were helpful. Um, Challenging the avoidance. The little things I stopped doing. When I stopped going to the grocery store, instead I would order it so I didn't have to get out and feel pain in my feet. I would sit down while I was brushing my teeth so I didn't have to worry about pain in my feet. And like little stuff like that, just noticing stuff and challenging that avoidance, standing up while I'm brushing my teeth, going into the grocery store and even just walking 3 laps around it, just to show my body that we can do it. That was extremely helpful. And then, of course, just the support of the therapist and the support of my PT. So I hope that's helpful. My whole point in this is I wanted you to know that sometimes you'll hear low insight's hard to treat, blah, blah, blah. Low insight can have a lower willingness to engage in treatment. I will attest to that. But that doesn't mean that you can't engage in it. That doesn't mean that you can't challenge the avoidance, that you can't meet other people that can help inspire you to want to get better, that you can't just keep getting out and living your life every day. Keep fighting. The insight, you can gain it back. You can. And you can even engage in therapy with low insight. That's what I did. And it helped boost up my insight just by seeing that I could do things that my brain was telling me I couldn't. So, start there. Start challenging yourself with things that you haven't been doing. Get support. Reach out to me. Come join my community. Meet other people. You deserve to not go through this alone. So I hope this was helpful. And if you are looking for treatment, go to nocd.com or treatmyocd.com. And for my services, chrissyhodges.com or chrissyhodgescommunity.com. See you next time.